Good to have you back on Newsday. Startup ecosystem in Nigeria has been a hotbed of innovation and entrepreneurship, continually evolving to meet the demands of a dynamic global economy. From the ascendance of artificial intelligence and the intentional, often dramatic and foreseeable downfall of startups large and small, last year was an action-packed year for tech and venture. So what should everyone expect from this unique ecosystem in 2024? Well, the author of those remarkable words is here with us to share his peculiar insight. Omoruyi Edoigiawerie is a lawyer, founder and lead partner at a full-service law firm offering bespoke legal services with a focus on startups. Good to have you. Welcome to Newsday.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
All right. So, from a general point of view, how would you describe entrepreneurial ecosystem in Nigeria currently, from public, private, non-profit, and of course, developmental perspectives?
Well, if you look at entrepreneurship, one of the key things when you talk about entrepreneurship is the fact that you have people who make money from identifying problems, providing solutions to those problems, and making profit. I said to someone, Nigeria is one of the best places to do business today. And they said to me, what do you mean? Look, I said, yes, these are problems, looking for solutions. And that brings us to entrepreneurship and the Nigerian market. Now is one of the best times to be alive, especially for young people who are tech-driven, who understand technology and innovation, and who realize that doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result will take you nowhere. Leveraging on technology, we're able to provide solutions to those problems, harness talent, and make money. And that's why I'm sure you'll hear about the digital economy today. Yeah. If you look at the budget for this year, oil revenue still continues to thrive, trump over the other expected forms of revenue. But I am looking at a system where in the coming year, 1 or 2, 3 years, you have non-oil exports giving oil a run for their money. And one key component of that is technology and innovation, driven by the entrepreneurial spirit and that our digital economy today is one of the key prongs upon which most developed economies are standing. Our human resource capital all over the world are leveraging on our African talents, building innovative, technology-driven solutions that are driving these economies. So we've got to harness that locally and work on our talents, work on that creative ecosystem, work on ensuring that we're able to harmonize these skill sets into building a digital economy. I often say, look, data, for instance, is the new oil. Startups, tech-driven businesses are the miners of that oil. And behind that, you find the fulcrum of that digital economy that we're looking at. So, yes, it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be able to work in a place where you have things every day staring at you looking for solutions, right? I'm sure 10 years ago, when the television media industry were looking at their plans, they probably did not project that you would now be leveraging on streaming to boost your audience. That's what technology does, right? Before COVID, we didn't know that you could have multiple meetings across the world sitting in one place. And that's what technology does. So let's imagine the next 10 years, right? You have artificial intelligence, for instance. The world is tilting towards AI. Everything we're doing, is driven by AI. You say certain things today, and the next thing you see the adverts popping up on your phone and all that. Now, how do we harmonize that system to be able to produce not just an approach to help hone indigenous talents, but also help us remain relevant? We're the largest black country in the world, right? You have 200 million people. You have young people making up the crop of these numbers. The era of the 9 to 5 is over, right? Now we are in an era where you've got to build. And when we were pushing for the Startup Act in 2021, 2022, one of the things that we said is that the next innovative product could come from a village in Benin, where I come from, right? The next best thing in technology, in telecoms, could come from that village, in somewhere in the north, one young guy producing a product, right? That's where we need to go to. And all these fall within that entrepreneurial spirit. Because if you really are not looking at the problems that are staring you in the face, you are unable to find solutions to those problems.
It's interesting that you say that Nigeria is a good place to of course, to have a startup in, because there are certain statistics that might argue with you on that. But I think what it is that it's focused on the enabling environment, not necessarily the people, which is very interesting that you mentioned the Startup Act, because regulatory frameworks are very important in giving that ecosystem the cushion that it needs to allow startups make the mistakes that they need to do. Now, if we look at the regulatory frameworks that we know that can impact the startups, are there any emerging trends, regulatory trends or changes that Nigerian startups should be attentive to in 2024, and how might they influence their operations in Nigeria? So,
starting point is that, for instance, we have the Startup Act. The Startup Act has zero regulation. It's an enabling law that is to help propel the digital and innovative ecosystem, help encourage startups to thrive, build, thrive, and grow, right? And for the first time, you have a law that has zero penalties or regulations, but continues to provide building blocks upon which startups can thrive. In 2024, we expect that the act will move beyond just, being an act, but will be given full life, which means we're expecting labeling, right? A couple of months ago, the NIDA rolled out the portal, right? And have now called on startups to begin to register on the portal. I know that there are plans in the works to start looking at labeling startups. Now, that's the starting point. Richard Quest was in Nigeria a couple of years ago, and he said what amazed him about Nigeria's entrepreneurs is that they thrive irrespective of the challenges that they face, right? So you have people who are tenacious. The missing link is providing that proper system in place where, despite the grit that they have, they are also able to access certain supports like funding, like licensing approvals, like waivers, like tax rebates and all that. And these are some of the things that the Startup Act has provided, right? You have the Finance Act that has given some tax buffers, right? You have the Business Facilitation Act, which is very interesting and which makes government singular. That says, look, if you are in one unit and you receive a process, and there are 7 other government agencies or ministries, you have the responsibility to get that done. Government is one, there's no fragmentation, and that has always been a major problem. The biggest problem startups have, I advise them, is some of them don't even know the laws that regulate what they do. They don't even know the licenses they need. And that was one key thing that we pushed on in ensuring that, look, the Act provides a portal, which is a watershed, where you go to and get all the licensing you need, all the troubleshooting you need, all the support you need, and all the interactions with the regulators. But the biggest support the ecosystem can get from the other side, which is government, is a regulator that understands that technology and innovation is a moving train, that understands the swiftness. Because the challenge that oftentimes happens is that on the other side of the divide, where government or regulators are, you have people who are used to bureaucratic systems, who are used to lay down traditional procedures. But I'll tell you that technology and the innovative ecosystem is swift. Things are changing per second, right? And so you've got to have people or regulators understand that change and be in tune. But it's also important, to also be the rope that keeps you from going too fast and, overshooting yourself. We've got to create that balance. And that's where you have that disconnect, right? Because you have creative startups who have creative, groundbreaking ideas. But they really can't sit down with regulators because, you see, On the other side of the divide, these guys don't understand what we're doing. You know, so that's a challenge. But bridging that gap is very important.
All right, just before we go, I'd like you to do this briefly. What would you describe as the major startup ecosystem in Nigeria to watch out for this year?
Oh,
briefly.
Agri-tech, health tech, right? Fintech, there's a lot of activity in the fintech space. We still have a financial inclusion problem. Many Nigerians remain unbanked. But health tech, agri-tech, you know, and a bit of ed tech. But agri-tech is key. And if you look in the last week or so, the Federal Ministry of Digital Economy released the 4I policy and gave grants to 10 agri-startups, right, in order to plow into the government's 500,000 arable land cultivation program, right? We've got to look at technology. Anything without technology today is obsolete. And so if we want to, let's even forget about competing. If we want to remain relevant and be alive and be productive, we've got to rely on technology. And the key component that will help this technology thrive are the startups. So providing them with an enabling environment is important. Understanding them and how they operate is important, right? And for private sector practitioners like us, ensuring that they comply with corporate governance frameworks that are able to keep investors comfortable enough to say, look, I want to invest in startups in Nigeria because they've got, you know, all the right things in place, you know, is also important. So when you talk about creating an enabling environment, it's beyond just government, right? Everybody has got a role to play. Our laws must now be given life. The Startup Act has stayed in the shelf for too long. We hope that this year we should see active labeling. There's a 10 billion naira sovereign wealth fund that is enshrined. And for the first time, you have a law that provides for a seed grant in a law, right? Which was not there. You don't have nothing like it before. We need to start giving life to that act, right? Because I say, every time I speak, I say, look, Nigeria is due for a Startup Act 2.0. But if we have not activated Act 1.0, we can't go to 2.0. We already know what some of the challenges are, and we will plug that in when we get to the conversation for 2.0. But let's activate 1.0. Let's start labeling. Let the support systems come in a more harmonized framework. And even beyond implementing the act at the federal level, it's important for the states also to plug in and provide that support. The ease of the Business Facilitation Act, right? Agencies of government have got to now realize that, look, government is one. And if that act gets in full swing, some of the challenges we have and we see today will be a thing of the past, right? We could sit down here and talk about the problems that are in Nigeria. We could sit down here and, lament for all we care. But if we really don't look at ingenious ways of achieving realistic solutions to our problems, right, one step at a time, we'll never get anywhere. Right? So we have two laws. We have the Startup Act. We have the Business Facilitation Act. These two laws, twin laws, as I call them, have, they
work hand in hand.
Yes,
somewhat.
and they have fantastic provisions that will help propel the innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem in Nigeria. Government has got to not just show the political will, but I've got to show the intentional behavior to ensure success. When that is done, internally for private sector players like myself, working closely with the startups to ensure that they have internal corporate governance frameworks, right? I'm sure, you see a lot of corporate governance failures in the ecosystem. And oftentimes, right, while I'm not holding forth for them, oftentimes these challenges are from a place of reduced knowledge as to that space.
All right.
And so it's important for them to get that knowledge and go from there.
All right, then this has been very insightful. Thank you so much. Lead partner at Edoigiawerie and company LP. Thank you so much for being on here. We appreciate your time and analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you.